Some of your empties, your empty bottles that have been laying around in the garage and the barn for years could be worth a lot of money. Hey, it's Don. Today we're going to look at something that surprises many people. We're going to show you some of the value in old empty bottles. These are ones you could have laying around the house right now that could sell for thousands of dollars. Let's look at some right now and give you an idea of what you should be looking for. So many people don't know the difference between an expensive bottle of wine, an expensive whiskey bottle, and just some average everyday one. Most people, it's just a wine bottle to most people. But if you know the right variety, the right type, the right maker, winery, the right date, all of that sort of thing adds to it. So if you're able to pick out a bottle that looks pretty much like most other bottles, you can get some big money from some of them, like this one here that sold for almost $1,800. Now, I'll try my best at pronouncing it Romani Conti. If that's correct, I don't know. But again, you see the bottle here is sold for quite a lot of money. Most wine bottles in general look very similar to that. If you're getting a decent bottle, they're in colored glass. This is a 2001. It's not super old. It's something you could find in a garage. Somebody might have had it left over from a wedding. It might have been a wedding present or anything along that line. One of my friends who was at our wedding actually purchased a very expensive bottle of wine for us, for me and my wife, as our wedding present. And, of course, it was a very tasty bottle of wine, but it was extremely expensive. The bottle itself we ended up selling, I don't know, 5 years later or something like that for, I don't know, $300-400 empty. I've always messed with vintage bottles, and I would recommend looking at these sorts of things. Barn sales are a great place to find some very valuable empty bottles. They don't have to be wine. Whiskey shows up, jugs, all sorts of different things like that. But these are the type of things in ages and years that you can turn up at a garage sale, a flea market, even a church sale. Crafter sales, things like this show up as well. And here's yet another one. The same brand, same maker, but from 1998. Now, the cork can add a little bit to it because the cork, in many cases on these, are marked with the winery, the company, the owner's name on it as well. They're kind of a matched pair to some extent. Now, one other thing you might think about here, too, people sometimes will take the labels off, and you will run into a book or a stack of just loose labels. The labels from these sorts of bottles can also sell for hundreds of dollars, if not thousands for the right one. Even a bottle in some cases without the labels can still sell for a ton of money also. And these sorts of things are easily missed because of what it is. It's new. If you looked at a bottle and it said 2001 and it's a wine bottle sitting in someone's garage, it's dusty and dirty, would you assume that could go for a couple $1,000s? Most people wouldn't. This one you see went for $1,200. And here's yet another one by the same maker, the same company as well, from 1972. It's a burgundy red wine, unwashed bottle, so the bottle's dirty. When you run into these sorts of bottles, say in a barn or in a garage, many times they might have used it and you might find nails in it. They literally set it on a rafter somewhere or on a beam and it just sat there for 40 or so years. That sort of thing happens. You'll find them in a barn sale, a flea market, or something along that line. They may be selling these sorts of things for just a couple of bucks just because of what it looks like. This went for almost $1,200 as well. Now, whiskey bottles are almost always on the top end of the list. Various brands and makes. There are some well-known ones like Jack Daniel's that can carry a horrendously high amount of value. This one's from 1958. It's a malt old Scotch whiskey bottle. Macallan, I guess you would say, 25th anniversary. So this is a special one that was only issued in 1 year, may have only been issued in a month, or there may be limited quantity. Even in 1958, they did that sort of thing. This one went for right at the $800 mark. This is one of those things you might find in a bucket in the basement. Now, some of these sorts of things are better with age, so it's not uncommon to run into old bottles like this here. Now, this is one of my favorite. This is a Don Julio 1942 tequila bottle with the coffin box it came in. There's a little stand for it. Now, this isn't from 1942. That's just the brand, like 1800 or something like that. Tequila-wise, this is a very good tequila. If you ever get the chance to try it in some fancy restaurant, I would recommend it. Very neat bottle. You might run into just the box, and you might run into the stand, or you might just run into the bottle. There's 3 aspects here, and all of them are worth a few $100s on their own. Together like this in a set, they do extremely well. It's a nice display piece. This bottle routinely sells in this price range, sometimes even more than that. And again, these are all empty bottles. Here's another interesting one. This is a Panhandle Brewing Company Idaho beer bottle. Doesn't have to be whiskey always. Beer items in general can carry a horrendously high value, but these sorts of things turn up. This is from 1912, so it's a very early bottle. The label's dirty. It has some staining. There's some rips and tears into it. These things are just, again, set on a shelf somewhere. Someone forgot about it. Could be out in the yard even. Sometimes these turn up in pits and things. Sometimes these bottles, the label may be mostly gone, but it still will sell. This one went for almost $700. Now here's a name most people will know, Hennessy. This is an Imperial Hennessy bottle. It's silver plated at the top. Most of the time when I've run in or seen one of these, that's all been pretty much blackened and dirty and dingy. It's a nice piece. There's a lot of these earlier specialty bottles. Jim Beam, Jack Daniels has some really earlier ones. Some have etched glass. Some have very expensive made glass like Lalique or something like that. Almost $370 for this one. Now here's another one. This one's an empty flask style bottle. And this is a good example of one without a label on it. I don't care if it has a label or not. I don't really care about any of that aspect of it because there's many that can still sell for hundreds of dollars, label or not, intact or not. Some of these were issued without a label even. So you have to consider that when you're out there shopping and looking around for bottles. But this one sold for $355. It's from 1898. At least that's the patent date. So it could have been made after that date. Now, along the line of Hennessy, this is a Remy Martin Louis XIII bottle, and it's a Baccarat glass. It's a really nice example, to say the least. They've made some, I guess, limited runs. They issue bottles like this sometimes in the 20,000 limited market, and, you know, there may only be a few in each city available and things like that. Sometimes they're even pre-orders, sometimes they're promotional. $350. Now, here's a super name to always be looking for, Pappy Van Winkle. Extremely sought-after bottle. It's from the Family Reserve. This is a 15-year-old and a 20-year-old bourbon bottle, bourbon whiskey bottles. Empty, excellent label. The label on its own can sell for $50 to $100. The older the label, the more it could sell for also. They still sold these two right here for $326. There's quite a few by Pappy Van Winkle that sell for some really good money. Now here's a pair of Petrus bottles from 1988. They're French and they went for $300. Again, it looks like pretty much any other bottle of wine. It's from 1988. It's not super old. Most people won't assume it's worth that much money. Now, like I said earlier, sometimes the label is pretty much gone, damaged, destroyed like this one here, but yet it will still sell. You can make out enough information to know exactly what this bottle was from, what was in it, and the whole works. From 1900, Van Hook Whiskey, Cynthiana, Kentucky, paper label's still there. Sold for over $200 for something in this beat-up condition. These are one of those flea market finds that you may be able to get for $1 or $2. Now here's a good example of probably someone from a bar who's selling these. This is a Suntory whiskey bottle here. It's a 30-year-old, it's empty, and they're selling 5 of them. So it does look like it's a shelf in a restaurant or something like that to me. I did look at the details on this one and some other ones. And that is a thing, as I said. So there are many people who do this. Some people will buy them from restaurants, the ones they know they can get money for. There's a very well collected skull that carries tequila, and that empty is in many, many bars, and you can easily get 25, 30, 40, 50 bucks for some of those as well. Now here's one from Henry Jayer. This is from 1985, and once again, it's just a wine bottle. It doesn't look like much at all to most people. If you're not a wine drinker, again, you may not realize the label doesn't show up. It's not very common. It's expensive. It has some issues with it still, and it still went for over $200, as you see it here. So had this bottle been in better condition without all the issues with it, This might have went for $500 or $600. Couple more Pappy Van Winkle bottles here. They came in little velvet bags, just like Crown Royal. Even the bag that this came in can sell for 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks, depending on the bag itself. If someone has the empty bottle but doesn't have the bag, they're going to want the bag because that's how it was issued, just again like Crown Royal. And yet again, Pappy Van Winkle shows up. Here's 2 bottles, 20-year-old reserve, red velvet bags, empty as well, $435. So that's a name I would always recommend looking for. Not super, super old. They're not super, super rare. There's enough of them out there. You go to enough places, you're going to run into this one out there sometime in your searches. Now, I'm not going to begin to even pronounce this one at all. I'm not even going to give it a try because I know I will butcher it. But there are some bottles, some things that may not look like a bottle of alcohol whatsoever. It may just look like a decorative vase with no real value. You may even pick it up, see the bottom, and realize that it is from some sort of whiskey thing, but once again, may not realize that it carries any sort of value. This is one of those oddball things. It has printing on it, so again, that turns people off, I would say, a little bit to think that it's worth a lot of money. Now, the bottle on its own without the box can carry a pretty darn good value as well, but with the box, it can easily sell into the several $1,000 range. There's several different versions. The company made many other bottles that carry a high value also. Now, of course, there's legalities in selling a full bottle. You can't sell without a license, a liquor license, ATF, the whole works. So don't mess with them if they have anything in it. Many cases, something like this, you may just drink the contents and then sell the bottle and still get some money out of it. So anyway, let's just look at a couple more items just to give you one more side area in empty bottles. So what we have here are several medicine bottles. They don't even necessarily have to be glass to carry a value, but the glass ones are usually what you want to look for. They're in boxes. These are pharmacy bottles, basically, from an old doctor's office from the 40s maybe or so. They don't show up. They were discarded. They were dumped out just in case, you know, they don't keep these sorts of things around. So it's very rare to run into them in the first place. And the right medicine bottle from the right time can go for thousands. The medicine and pharmacy bottles in general can go for more than some of the whiskey bottles, at least as high as the whiskey bottles as well. I have seen some medicine bottles going for thousands, $5,000, $10,000 also in the past. And yet here's one more lot of medicine bottles. Here's 3 more. One has the box in the bottom, just as they would have been issued to the pharmacy, and a couple more on top here. Again, it depends on what the actual chemical or medicine or substance is as to the value. Some of them go for buku bucks no matter what it's in or what it is, just because of the type of product that it is. These are all empty. There's no illegal substances in them when they're empty like this. There's no personal name on them. They're straight pharmacy bottles, so there really isn't any legality with selling a 70-year-old bottle that's empty like this, and they went for several $1,000s, as you can see. But anyway, that's what I have for you today. Well, there we have it. Hopefully that gave you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You could also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
When the sun goes down and the evening rolls around, that's the time I find got blue ribbon on my mind. I got that blue ribbon on my mind. More and more lately I find I've got a taste for living. I'm thinking
America's premium beer since 1844. Pabst. A lot to look forward to.